Hello everyone, Professor Cohn here, and today we are going to be talking about Chapter 4, which is giving your first speech. So, we're going to do an abbreviated version since, one, I don't have you to interact with, just virtually. Hello. And two, there's some things I wanted to talk about in class today that we didn't quite get to. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a synopsis from Chapter 1, and then we're going to be showing some videos here. If for some reason it's difficult to see because of how we're doing this, in terms of what I write on the board, I will also make sure to put links to the videos, or you can email me for those as well. So from Chapter 1, a couple key concepts I wanted to go over. Now, we talked about the similarities and differences between conversation and public speaking, but there were also a few things I wanted to talk about as it pertains to critical thinking, because public speaking helps you develop critical thinking skills. Now, in so much as that, there are a few things that I want you to take note of, and we'll see if we can get this on the board behind me here. And so when looking at critical thinking, there's three things I want you to pay attention to. I want you to be able to assess, okay? And assess, meaning assess your own strengths and weaknesses. Some of you did this when we were looking at the effective versus ineffective column when it comes to public speaking. Know the difference between your strengths and weaknesses, and that's the only way you can turn those weaknesses into strengths. You also have to be able to differentiate. And when I say differentiate, I mean be able to differentiate between fact and opinion. This is key not only as a speaker, but also as a listener. You have to be able to understand the difference between what you're telling someone. Is this something just that you believe, or is this actual factual information? Actual factual, like that. And also, as a listener, you have to listen with a critical ear and be able to know, is this something that I'm hearing that has been proven? Okay? Or is this just the opinion of the speaker themselves? And finally, based on that, we also need to look at credibility. Okay? So, in terms of that critical thinking, okay, what defines credibility? How are you going to prove your credibility? What are those relationships? When you look at the quality, okay, of your speech, it all goes back to how credible are you as a speaker, or how credible is the speaker that you're listening to. So there's more in depth on that on Chapter 1. But I also wanted to go back to talking about nervousness for a second. We talked about how nervousness can actually be transformed into something positive, positive nervousness. Now, the book goes in and talks about a few different ways. I want to talk to you about those. They give 6 steps to control nervousness. I'm going to talk to you and boil it down to 3 P's that I want you to really pay attention to. Okay? But they talk about, first of all, about taking a speech class, and congratulations, you're already doing that. So you're already on the first step. Then they talk about preparation. We talked about preparation a lot, right? And I do have that quote. Let's see, I found the actual quote from John Wooden that I had mentioned in class. Success is the byproduct of preparation, is what he says. Success is the byproduct of preparation. And then you remember the 10 times principle that I mentioned about John Maxwell, and he says that for every minute that you spend in preparation, it's going to save you 10 in execution. Just like for every minute you're on stage, you should be practicing 10 minutes. So it's kind of that transient property there about preparation. And then practice, right? We talked about practice. So preparation, practice, make sure you're actually going over not only what you want to say, but what you want to communicate, and then how could interference maybe, mess with that, and what you can do to actually change it around. And fourth, be positive. Now, this is one of the things I never want you to do. Well, I want you to be positive, but I never want you to come up and get ready for your speech and say, I might mess this up, or, oh, this isn't very funny, so just laugh anyway, or don't set yourself up for failure. You have to think positively about yourself, so you have to talk positively to yourself. Positive self-talk is very important. But we don't know if you're nervous, and that's the beauty of this. Chances are, most of you in this class are going to be nervous on your first speech, but you don't have to let us in on that. Get up here and act like the most confident person in the world, and we won't know any differently. So make sure that you're positive. Now, you see another P here, perfection. But that's not one of the P's to combating nervousness. You don't have to be perfect. So you need to really remove that veil of perfection from whatever it is you're thinking. None of us are perfect, and your speech certainly isn't going to be perfect, but you can put forth your best effort. And finally, visualization. And I'll talk to you more about this when we actually get to those first speeches and what that is. But I want you to remember, like I said, my version of the 3 Ps: preparation, practice, and positivity. Now, the one other thing I wanted to mention from Chapter 1 that, again, will come up later as we talk about listening and speaking is ethnocentrism. Now, ethnocentrism, see if we can write it on the board and see it here. Ethnocentrism is essentially believing that your culture, your society, is superior to other cultures. Okay? It's obviously a misnomer, a misbelief. And the idea is that when we're speaking, we need to know about who we are speaking to and make sure not only that we don't just offend, but again, that we take their beliefs into consideration. Not that we have to play it safe, but again, as you're adapting to your audience, you need to know what is it that they believe, and so you can adapt your speech accordingly. So we'll get into that next time, but I want to talk to you about preparing for your first speech. So, as we do that, in Chapter 4, you can follow along with me if you have the book, because there's a few steps that are just very basic. And the first one is to focus your topic. So this goes into our preparation, right? You need to focus, and I apologize if we can't see this, focus your topic. So what does that mean? Now, we'll do some exercises later, but focusing your topic is key, but before you can do that, you've really got to brainstorm on your topic. Don't just say, I want to speak about bats. Okay? I told you, I come up with animals for some reason, even though I'm not a huge animal person. But you want to be able to put a whole list of things out there. So that being said, I want you to email me back with 3 potential topics that you're thinking about. 3 topics that you think, what could I give an informative speech about? So that's your assignment from today, is to come up with 3 potential topics that you think you could give a 5-minute informative speech about. And they don't all have to be around the same idea. It could be something food-related, it could be a how-to, and it could be a summary of your favorite quotes. Whatever it is, 3 potential topics. So we have to start broad before we can focus our topic. But before giving your speech, you're going to have to focus your topic, okay? And then after you do that, you're going to develop your topic. So, remember, we can't just talk about how to make a taco. We need to actually look in depth. What do people already know? What do people not know? Is there something interesting that I can bring to the equation? You have to be able to filter that out there. Michael Hyatt did a very interesting blog post about something he learned from Andy Stanley, who is a pastor at North Point. You may be aware of him. And I'm going to fire up our projector here. And there are 5 things, he talks about 5 questions to ask as you prepare your speech. And I'm going to turn the light off here so you can see this along with me, hopefully a little better. But 5 things to think about as you prepare your speech. And number 1 is information. So you need to ask yourself, what does your audience need to know? Okay? What is it? And we talked about that key statement that you need to develop in your outline. He talks, too, about that key takeaway. What is that key takeaway that people will not forget? So some examples here. Your friends will determine the direction and quality of your life. Purity paves the way to intimacy. When you see as God sees, you'll do as God says. Choose the hard right over the easy wrong. So those are all examples of that key statement we talked about. So what is the one thing that you want your audience to take away from your speech? Second is motivation. So information is the first. Second is motivation. Why do they need to know it? Okay? This is the key, okay, to developing tension in your introduction. So we talked about, let's see here if we can see this here a little more clearly. We talked about the idea of being able to hook your audience, okay? Make them want to listen to you, because if people don't believe they need to know what you're going to tell them, they believe it's irrelevant. So what is the motivation? Number 3 is application. What do they need to do? Okay, so boiling your message down to something that your listeners can do with what it is you're telling them. Okay, even providing, assigning homework or providing some real-world examples is a possibility there. Fourth is inspiration. So we have information, motivation, application, and fourth is inspiration. Why do they need to do it? Okay, so it's not enough just to tell people what they need to know and why they need to know it and what they need to do about it. They also need to know why they need to do what you're asking them to do. Okay, so this is your opportunity to cast vision. Okay, what would your organization look like if everyone did this? How are you going to get them to act? And finally is reiteration. So what can I do to help them remember? Because after all, if you just talk about this and then no one does anything about it, what good is it, right? So what can you do as a speaker to help your audience remember it is what you've said? So that final key there then is, what can I do to help them remember, right? So information, motivation, application, inspiration, and reiteration. So there's 5 questions to ask yourself as you're preparing for your speech, as you're developing your outline. And I would say, if nothing else, you need to have that key statement, because everything you do should eventually point back to that. It should support it, it should enhance it, and it should be the one thing, if nothing else, that people remember about your speech. Okay? We talked a little bit about organization already, but I want to reiterate, those 3 key points, because it comes up again here in Chapter 4. So we have the introduction, we have the body, and we have the conclusion. And remember, within the body are those typically 3 main points that help support your key statement. Okay? Without that, we have an issue. So, what I want to do is I'm going to turn to page 72. This is a fairly short chapter, you'll see. So 72 in the book, and normally I'd have one of you in class read this, but I'm going to read this for you. It's a speech that's called, there's an app for that. Okay, let me see this. A Portuguese dictionary? There's an app for that. How to cook so she's impressed? Yep, there's an app for that. A game to play when class gets boring? There's an app for that. But is there an app for me, Michael Taylor? I'd like to think there are a few. Some of the things that make me who I am can be found by looking at the Photo Bucket, ESPN, and Pandora apps on my iPhone. Now, we talked a little bit about that hook. What are you going to do to get your audience's attention? So he starts out with those rhetorical questions. We said that's one way to do it. Is there an app for that? Now, that was not only a rhetorical question, but was a very catchy slogan for Apple when promoting the iPhone. So it's something that resonates. Most people have heard of that, but now he's tweaking it and using it in a different space. It's not just, is there an app for that on the phone, but he's actually looking at his life and saying, if there were apps that would describe me, what would they be? What would tell my story? Much like someone might ask in an interview, if you were a tree, what kind of a tree would you be? Or if someone had to play you in a movie, who would you choose? It's a very similar situation. It's taking something normal and giving it a little bit of a twist. And you can see that it's very clear. At the end of that introduction, he says, some of the things that make me who I am can be found by looking at the Photo Bucket, ESPN, and Pandora apps. So he's foreshadowing, right, his 3 main points, which are going to be these 3 apps. So let's keep reading. The first app you'd find would be Photo Bucket, which my little sister made me download. It holds my newest photos of life back home and allows my sister to share her photography talents with me. My family is warm and caring, and half the time they drive me nuts, but what's family for anyway? I know I can turn to them for anything, and I feel very lucky to have grown up in a family where there is always someone to support me. So he starts off, the first app you find is Photo Bucket. So again, referencing that main key statement, but then going into a little bit. It's not just about, well, here's the app on the phone, but why? Well, my little sister made me download it, and it represents my family, and my family is important to me. So it's a bridge that takes us to a bigger point. Number 2, because I'm an athlete, I'd be lost without my ESPN SportsCenter app. Now, I want to make sure that I show you this here, that it's not just the same thing. First is this, second is this, third is this. there's a little liberty, right? Because I'm an athlete, I'd be lost. So he's starting it in a different way. So just because we have a pattern doesn't mean that it has to be rote or boring or overly systematic. You can still have organization without having exact duplication. He goes on to say, it gives me up-to-the-minute scores on any sport. I played football, baseball, and basketball in high school, and I would rather be on a team than compete by myself. Through sports, I've learned the importance of being part of something bigger than myself. I've also learned how to lose with dignity and how to win with class. So again, in just a few short sentences here, shares something very illuminating about himself. Not only did we learn what he did in high school, the sports that he was a part of, but we learned what he learned from those apps and how it made him who he is today. So, finally, there's the Pandora app, which makes it super easy to explore new songs and groups. I've been involved with music ever since I started playing piano as a kid. Now I play jazz guitar and I sing. While in high school, I performed with a couple of groups around the Twin Cities. I really enjoyed it. And for here in Madison, I'm still looking for opportunities to showcase my talents. So again, giving us another side of himself, using the app as a conduit to talk about not only what he's done this before, but how it affects him now. In conclusion, okay, so through the PhotoBucket, ESPN, and Pandora apps, I can answer my initial question. Is there really an app for Michael Taylor? Yeah, there's an app for that. So you see, just like with the Billy Crystal speech, and I know not everyone got to see that, so I'll link to that as well. When he started out, he made us laugh. And then he talked some more and then came back to, he made us laugh, right? So in this speech, again, a shorter version of what you'll be doing, but there's that continuity. I mentioned to some of you that conclusion, you want it to wrap your speech up with a nice bow. It needs to, like we just read with the Michael Hyatt post, reiterate what it is that's your main point. So not only did he reiterate the three main points, right? So with the PhotoBucket, ESPN, and Pandora apps, I can answer my initial question, the question that he asked in the beginning. Is there an app for Michael Taylor? And then goes back to that catchphrase. Yeah, there's an app for that. So you see how it all fits together nicely. It reinforces the message that he wants to make, and it gives us that conclusion at the end. Now, obviously, this is an informative speech. It's not a persuasive speech. He's not asking anyone to do anything in particular. If it was a persuasive speech, then you would want to make sure that you actually give information of, I'll pass around a petition for you to sign after I'm done speaking, or here's the best way to donate. Whatever it is, you need to make sure that you equip your audience with what it is you're asking them to do. But I thought this speech was a really nice way of just showing in a condensed form what it is we're trying to do in preparing for our first speeches. If we look at this example here, now, this is an example of a speech. I mentioned John Maxwell in our first class session together here. And he's not only an author, he's a pastor at my former church in Florida. And anyone who has heard John Maxwell speak knows that he has a pattern. Now, I'm not suggesting that you need to have a certain speech pattern that you follow for every single speech, but just like we did with Jim Gaffigan, it's important to watch how people speak as much as we need to listen to what they are saying. And you'll find that there's comfortability in having this type of pattern as you speak. So I'm going to play the first few minutes of this. Again, I'll link to it so you can watch it more in depth later. But I want you to just pay attention to the pattern. Since this is the introduction, there's not going to be that much depth, but we'll come back and I'll tell you more in just a second.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good morning. It's so good to be back at Christ Fellowship. There's no place like this place anywhere near this place. So this must be the place, huh? Look at your neighbor and say, this is the place. Go ahead and tell them. A few years ago, I was doing a Bible project, and pretty much in my own personal time in the Word, I've pretty much throughout my life done projects. And in Hebrews chapter 12, it talks about the fact that you and I are surrounded by a cloud of witnesses, men and women of faith, those people that are described in Hebrews 11. And they're in the stands and they're cheering us on as we are running our life race. In other words, those who have been faithful, before us are now cheering us on. And when I read that passage of Scripture, all of a sudden I thought, in a crowd, you can never distinguish one voice. It's many voices. And I thought, I wonder what would happen if these great men and women of God, these people of faith, could step out of the stadium, come down on the track where we're running, and if they could run one lap with us, and they could only say one thing to us, what would they say? And that kind of got me going. And so I started doing character studies, and I would try to read the life of a person and then condense their life into one sentence or one statement. And it was so much fun that I decided to write a book on it, so I wrote a book. I can still remember, I wrote a book during the summer up in a place up in North Carolina where Margaret and I were staying. And I can still remember my office was in a loft, and she would be down below me. And I would write for a while, and I'd run over to the end, and I'd say, Margaret, I'm anointed, listen to this, listen to this. And I would read it to her, and then I would go back, and I just had such a sense of anointing when I wrote that. It's called Running with the Giants. And if you don't have it, I would encourage you to get it. It's here. It's available. I'm going to sign right after the service. And for you that are at the other campuses, I already signed hundreds of them and sent them to the campuses, so they're signed, okay? And you say, well, do I need this book? Well, let me tell you something. How many of you like to be encouraged? Would you raise your hand if you like to be encouraged? That's an IQ test, by the way. This book will encourage you. Every person that comes and runs a lap with you, 10 Bible characters, they'll encourage you. And if you have a friend that needs to be encouraged, it's a great book for them. And I'll sign it for you. And so I did 10 Bible characters, Old Testament, and I called it Running with the Giants. And our secular publisher, Hachette out of New York City, recently came back and said, John, we'd like you to do it again. We'd like you to do a second Running with the Giants book. It's pretty good when a secular publisher wants you to do a biblical book, huh? And I said, okay, I'll do it. And so what I want to do in a moment is I'm writing the second book, okay? And you're going to hear it before you get to read it, all right? And so that when it comes out, you can say, oh, that's old stuff. I heard him say that many years ago, okay? And so let me give you an example of the first book, Running with the Giants. And for example, Noah, go to your notes now. Noah, if he could run one lap with you, he would say one person can make a difference. Because that's what he did. He made a difference. Noah made a difference. He was righteous. God spared the world because of him. If Esther could run one lap with you or me, she would say to us, God has a place for you. And she discovered that God put her in a position, in a place where he could use her incredibly for the kingdom. If David, who was running a lap with you, could say one thing to you or me, in the essence of his life, he would say, don't give up on your dreams. And now that brings us down, those are 3 of the 10 biblical characters that in the first book, Running with the Giants. That brings us down to Elijah, okay? Because he's one of the second.
So again, that's just a few minutes of that. But anyone, if you were to go onto this website it's at gochristfellowship.com, you can look at their sermon archives. But John Maxwell is known for having a very similar style. You notice he sits down and he automatically he says something to the audience, he says something funny, and then he seems to always have the audience turn to each other and say hi to each other, or tell the person next to you, you're smart for coming today, or something that engages them. And then he launches into a story. Okay, something personal, sometimes self-deprecating, but we talked about being relatable, and he doesn't just remain as this figure seated on a stool on stage. He says something that is endearing, whether about his family or an experience he had or a time he messed up, and brings you in. And then somehow he always weaves in that, and I've got these books, and here's the books. And again, it is promoting what he does, and it just integrates it into his speech. And you notice in that last little part there, he talks very clearly about, here's 10 biblical characters and what they would say to you. And what did he do? He alluded to 3 of them. He showed you 3 of them. And if you want all 10, what? You have to go by the book, right? So that hook, again, he's talking about, well, here's something that everyone should know. And I'm going to tell it to you clearly. But if you want more, here's where it is, right? You don't want to get up on stage and share everything you have to say in one sitting. I used to feel like if someone was paying for me to come speak, I had to give them as much information as I could and pack it all in. And what happened is that I turned into that fire hydrant. If you've ever seen on the side of the street when someone opens a fire hydrant and it just explodes out, right? I would just batter my audience with all of this information thinking, well, I'm going to give them as much as I can. But then there wasn't that solid takeaway, right? I was just throwing things out there and hoping something would stick. You need to be more focused. And if someone enjoys what you have to say, they're going to want to hear more, as opposed to trying to throw a huge mix at them all at once and then never having the opportunity to speak to them again. Remember what we talked about in persuasion, and you just have to move someone a step. You're not trying to get them to believe what you believe, but think about why they do what they do. That's what you want. You want to challenge them. You want to inspire them. You want to make them think. And then with that, hopefully you'll have the opportunity to share more again later. So that's what we're doing. When it comes to the actual delivery of your speech, okay? So talking about delivering the speech, there's something that the book talks about in terms of what we're really going for, and that's speaking extemporaneously. I'm not going to try to write it on the board. You probably won't be able to see it. It's on page 68 in your book, speaking extemporaneously. And speaking extemporaneously can be defined as, I think the book says, carefully prepared without reading your speech, not relying on notes like I am right now. So there's a couple of different types of speaking, but being able to speak in a fairly conversational way, in a very comfortable way. A couple of you mentioned that's the key of a good speaker, is being able to just speak comfortably as if you're not relying on notes, but it's still very carefully prepared. It's not just off the cuff. It's not as it comes to me. So the idea of the preparation that we talked about as being so important, leading you to be able to speak in a comfortable way as if you didn't have your notes, even though those were carefully prepared in those stages beforehand. So extemporaneous speaking, of course, to do that you have to be able to rehearse the speech well, like we talked about. Start out by, if you're not comfortable doing it for your friends, for your suite mates, for parents, face the wall. Do this. Record yourself on a private link on YouTube even. And then watch yourself back again. Speak to yourself in the mirror. Try speaking without your notes and see what happens. But pay attention to your eyes. Pay attention to the angles of your body. Pay attention to, do you talk with your hands a lot and your hands are always going in a circular motion? Or do you find that you keep your hands down and in your pockets, or that swaying motion? Those are the things you want to pay attention to as you rehearse. Of course, those gestures that we just mentioned are important, and eye contact as well. So things that we've talked about already, but it bears repeating that those are important aspects to think about when delivering that first speech. So, with that being said, we have, like I said, the informative speech is what's going to be coming to us first. Okay? And I want to show you one more example of an informative speech. It's actually of a segment that I did on Talk of the Town a couple years ago. And so this is going to show you how you take a topic, it's a specific topic, with different pieces of it, and then a really specific informative purpose. So I'm going to turn this again this way and let you all watch and listen.
Well, some of the sweetest keepsakes from my own children are the things that they made for me when they were little. Frugal Mom Sandy Comm has been thinking along those lines too, and she's here with some fun and inexpensive ideas that the kids can make. I love these.
Right, these are fun, right?
Yeah.
I feel like I have to put a disclosure on anytime I do something like this. If I can do it, anyone can do it, especially a 5-year-old.
So you say you're not really
I
crafty.
am not crafty. I'm not a Pinterest kind of girl. So these are cheap. Everything is under $5. Most of them are only 80 cents, $2, and a lot of these things you're going to have around your house.
Oh, really? Okay.
You want to start out?
Starting down with the pen.
Kind of an old standby, the cookie jar, mason jar, cookie mix, bread mix, things like that. It's so easy. You basically just put the dry ingredients in, put a cute little note, and tag some colorful fabric or ribbon. We even bought ramekins last year at a craft store after Christmas. Got them. They're mini like bread ramekins. And we just did angel food cake for our kids' teachers and said, you're an angel. Thank you for teaching our angel. So again, 49 cents for that.
Nice idea.
Baked goods are always great. These are homemade ornaments. Again, at the craft store, you can just get these. They come out wooden, and we just paint them white, and then we take family pictures. And we've been doing this, as you can see, over the years with just some T-shirt paint and a little embellishment, and it's a neat keepsake. I found these are not completely homemade, but you can just take your Sharpie, a paint pen, and write someone's name on it. Again, 49 cents for some of these personalized ornaments that you would spend $20 for at a mall kiosk.
Nice.
Yep.
These coasters are really clever.
Are these cute? Now, I can't take credit for these. These were a housewarming gift that were given to us last Christmas by friends.
Okay.
And I said, I found out how you did it. She said, it's just towels that you get from Home Depot.
Okay.
82 cents. You put Mod Podge over. That's the crafting genius that you see on all of these.
Right.
It's like
It's scrapbook paper.
Scrapbook paper. So 69 cents. You cut a square, and you can put felt on the back of it if you don't want them to move around. But that's it. And they're
Very
safe from water.
I think that's great. All right, if you want to make jewelry gifts, you've got some
Yeah.
fun ideas.
Yeah.
Oh, this one's a scarf, actually,
That's
right?
a t-shirt scarf. It's a
Kid
kid-size
scarf.
t-shirt scarf. And you basically just cut off the ends of an old t-shirt, and then they kind of roll into each other automatically, and then you just make a little embellishment at the end. That's the natural print that was on the t-shirt already. My
That's
Sunday school
cute.
teacher taught her that.
And then if you've got a little bit of ribbon and some hair clips, you can make these.
Again, just those alligator clips that all the little girls love. You just take some hot glue, wrap your ribbon around it. You can do it simple, like the pink one there. I thought that was fun. It's still wintry, but it's, nice and girly. Or add a little embellishment with a bow.
All right, how about this? Get washers from the
The
hardware store
washer.
and make jewelry.
Yeah, so I'm wearing all of the jewelry too. So it's literally washers that you get for pennies. I took a Sharpie, right on it, and you can do your kids' names. I've got my kids' names on my necklace. You can do Faith Hope, you can put the year on it, and then just, again, a silver strand from the craft store for about $1.13 is what it was.
Nice. We got to take a look at your earrings because that's what we're getting ready to make right now. You make these out of paper clips and embroidery cloth.
That's all it was. So basically, this is a larger paper clip that I took right here. And all I did was you unwind it. So you take any size paper clip. The purple ones you see down there are smaller. But you take it and you unwind it like this. And you make it in whatever shape you want. So basically, we did a triangle because that's the easiest.
Sure.
So Meryl, you've got one there already.
Yeah, I'm going to get started on
Yep,
this.
start wrapping. So basically, you take that, you take a little piece of tape and secure your shape here. Okay. And all you do then is take that embroidery floss, like you see that like I said, took from my daughter's friendship bracelet, trunk, and you tied it on, and then you just start wrapping, and you adhere. Oops, I did this up. You adhere the little earring clip to the paper clip, and then you're done. And at the end,
When you're not doing it on TV, you'll do a much better job than that. Your kids will do better than I can.
That's true. Your kids are going to do better at most of the evil. But you just put this on. You take a little bit of a hot glue gun to secure it at the end. And I mean, even parents are going to love these. Grandparents
I
are
think
going to
that's a
love
great
them.
idea. Merry Christmas to you.
Merry
Thank
Christmas
you
to
so
you.
much.
Thank you.
You'll find more frugal ideas and money-saving meal planning recipes on her website. We're going to link you to Sammy, with an I, SammyCohn.com.
And there you have it. So, I noticed a couple ums in there, I'm embarrassed to say. See, we're not all perfect, right? But that gives you an idea of, I wanted to show that particular speech or TV appearance because it had that how-to element. Now, yours doesn't have to be that in-depth. If you notice, I had a couple different categories of things that you can make. So it was all the ideas of Christmas gift your kids can make for under $5. Very specific. And then I separated out into categories. I had, you could do this, we had the food gifts, we had the ornaments, right? The kind of DIY, we had the, well actually it was all DIY, the jewelry, right? And then I actually demonstrated how to do it. So it's all very informative. Do you see how there's no persuasion there? I'm not telling you why you should make homemade gifts. I'm not telling you why you should spend $5 or under. Now your speech can just be, it could just be how to make paperclip earrings. That could be your speech. Think of it like a demonstration. If any of you had done 4-H, you have to do these, demonstration speeches. So how to make wax candles, or like I said, how to practice yoga. Really, the sky's the limit, and that's why I want you to come up with 3 possible topic ideas and turn those into me before we're back together in class so we can be thinking about that. So that's my synopsis of Chapter 4 for you. Hope that you enjoyed it or at least understood it. We'll make sure to talk about it more back in class, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.